Okay, we're Daf Yomi is sponsored for the week. The big week of catch-up, which has been great. We've been a good week. Thank you to our sponsor for the week, Yishai and Rebecca Schwartz. Clearly, the credit is to you. Leili Nishmas, Rebecca's grandfather, Mr. Eliyanku, Eliyahu ben Yaakov Rivka, whose yurtzeit was on the 21st of Shvat. May his neshava have an aliyah. And we are at Tanya, Amar Rabbi Shimon Shizuri, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down on Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph. Okay, time we're in a Raisa. Rabbi Shimon Shizuri, we're all talking about all the halachas like Rabbi Shimon Shizuri. Here's another thing Rabbi Shimon Shizuri said. Pam achas nis'arev li tevel bechulin. One time, I got mixed up tevel, which is the produce that grows that I have not taken off trumos and maestros from. Rashi entertained the possibility that this was a rabbinic scenario, a tevel of demai. Rashi prefers the position that this was actually regular tevel.
So there's tevel you can't eat.
Can't eat it. It's a chi of misa b'dei shemayim, same prohibition as if you would eat truma. Nobody can eat, even a kohen can't eat tevel, right? And if he mixed it up with his chulin, with his regular produce that already had everything taken off. So now, Ubasi v'shalti es Rabbi Tarfon. So I asked Rabbi Tarfon, what am I supposed to do? V'amar li, he said to me, Lech kach lechla min hashuk. Go, what you need to do is you need to get more produce from the marketplace. And he tells him to get other produce from the marketplace, which is rabbinically required to separate truma. Why is this going to, if tevel is a deoraisa problem, why is it this only rabbinic? Because from a Torah perspective, it's batal barov. We said all these circumstances, really from the majority, it's nullified. However, rabbinically speaking, we didn't nullify it. Why? Because this is a davar sheyesh lo matirin, as we discussed back in, right, when Maseches Zvachim, we talked all about different types of things that were not nullified in majorities, and we said a davar sheyesh lo matirin means that something that can be permitted, right? If I have a classic example, an egg which is born on Yom Tov in Maseches Beitzah, right? So if it gets mixed with other eggs, it's muktzah, gets mixed with other eggs, even 1,000, it's not nullified. Why? Because if I wait till tomorrow, the egg's fine. So therefore, it's not nullified. All I got to do is wait one day, and then it's not a problem. So since there's a way to solve the tevel is to take trumas and maestros off of it, it's not batal. So what he says is, go to the market, go get yourself other rabbinically required produce, ve'aser alav, and then take meiser from the rabbinically required produce that you have and make it satisfy, take extra to satisfy the tevel that's in the other pile. Kasavar deoraisa beruba batal. He's holding, as we said, that from a Torah perspective, this is already nullified. Verov amei haaretz me'asrim heim, and they hold that the amei haaretz, the majority of them do take trumos and maestros properly. Yeah. Therefore, the requirement to take off trumos and maestros of demai, of produce that you don't know what it is only rabbinic. So therefore, the havalei ketar mina pater ala pater. So what you're essentially doing is the tevel is already nullified. It's only a rabbinic problem. The demai is already considered to be trumos and maestros. It's only rabbinically required. So you took something which was exempt from a Torah level, but required midirabanan to have truma and maestros taken off, and you used that in order to satisfy the trumos and maestros obligations of something else, which is also rabbinic. Ve'lemalei, why didn't he tell him lech kach min ha'ovei kochavim? Why didn't he tell him go get from non-Jews? Right? If a non-Jew owns property in Eretz Yisrael, so then midoraisa, from a Torah perspective, they're not required to give trumas and maestros. The produce is not required in trumas and maestros because it grew in the property. This non-Jew, he doesn't have mitzvos, so he has. However, rabbinically, we established that you should take off trumas and maestros. So. Kasavar, the answer is why. So therefore, that would be another. Why did he tell him to go find demai? Tell him to go find a non-Jew and purchase that. So he says, no, that wouldn't be because Kasavar, Rabbi Tarfon holds ein kinyan lo'oved kochavim beretz Yisrael lafkia miyad maser. Rabbi Tarfon does not hold that if a non-Jew owns property, that the produce that grows is exempt from trumos and maestros. Why? Despite the fact that a non-Jew isn't chayav in mitzvos. It's not a din in the person, it's a din in the crops. The crops themselves grew in Eretz Yisrael. Now, while the non-Jew owns it, obviously doesn't have to take trumos maestros because he doesn't have mitzvos. But if a Jew ever comes in possession of it, he does have to take Trumas Meisos on a Torah level.
One thing that Trumas Meiser will only be for anyone Jews or non-Jews who live in Israel or on the farm.
So yes, so it only applies in Eretz Yisrael, and according to Rabbi Tarfon, Jew or non-Jew, right? So therefore, that's why he didn't tell him, right? That if he told him to go buy from a non-Jew, he would be telling him go take Trumas and Meisos, go take from something which is obligated in Trumas and Meisos from a Torah level to satisfy this, which is only on a rabbinic level, that we didn't want to do. Ika Amri, there are those who actually learned the story a little bit different. Amar Lay, that Rabbi and Shimon Shazuri came and told the story. So Rabbi Tarfon told Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, Lech kach mina ovei kochavim, go buy from a non-Jew. That's what he actually told him. Kasavar yesh kin lovei kochavim beretz Yisrael of kirum meiser. Why? Because Rabbi Tarfon did hold that there is that non-Jews have ownership in the land enough to be able to make it so that it's not obligated in produce from Trumas and Meisers from a Torah level. And therefore it's only rabbinically required. Therefore, it's this rabbinic requirement to take care of that rabbinic requirement, and he'd be okay. So, why didn't he tell him to go to the market and find a nama oretz? Right? Why didn't he tell him to do that? Kasavar ein rovei amaretz ma'asrin. And the answer is because Rabbi Tarfon holds you can't trust that. Most of them don't do Trumas and Meisers. It's very possible that it is Torah obligated to take off Trumas and Meisers from produce that you buy, and that would be a problem. So therefore, that's the dispute is what you think Rabbi Tarfon held about produce owned by a non-Jew. That law of produce land owned by a non-Jew is very much related to the.
When you give me a Jewish-owned farm next door. When I had land, maybe the Jewish farmer can see what's happening next door.
The Jewish farmer next door is obligated in Trumas and Meisers, even if the non-Jewish farmer is not. Right?
If he sees the Jewish farmer not doing it, he can go do it himself, can't he?
Person, if you know that a Jewish person is not doing his Trumas and Meisers, you have an obligation to take up Trumas and Meisers. Absolutely. But not necessarily with a non-Jew. This plays into the question about Shemitah. Right? If a non-Jew owns the land during the Shemitah year, can it be non-Shemitah produce? We have this heter mechira possibility where Beis Din sells land that's owned by Jews to non-Jews during the Shemitah year in order to allow the produce to be grown, to be consumed during the Shemitah year. It's related to this issue. Shalach le Rav Yemar bar Shlemya le Rav Papa. So Rav Yemar bar Shlemya says to Rav Papa to ask him a question. Hadna Amar Rabin bar Chinina, Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Halach Reb Shimon Shazuri. That which we had talked about yesterday extensively, Rabin bar Chinina said in the name of Ula and the name of Rav Chanina, that the halacha is like Reb Shimon Shazuri. Velo Od, and not only that, Ela Kol Makom Sheshana Rabbi Shimon Shazuri halachos. Whenever Rabbi Shimon Shazuri teaches something, the halacha is like him. Af ben is arev letevel bechun. Does it apply to this story that we just heard about the chulin and the tevel? Does it apply to that also? So Amar Lei'in, he says, of course it does. So Amar Ravashi, or Ravashi says, Amar Li Marzutra, Kashi Bey, Rabbi Chanina, Misura, Pshita. He said, Rabbi Chanina from Surah asked, obviously, he said, any place, Rabbi Shimon Shazuri says that the law is like him, and then his question is, yeah, but here? Yes, here, like every other place. Lamed Aleph Amar Beis. So Mik Amar Bim Mishnah Seinu, it doesn't say that it's only in a Mishnah, not in a Brisa. Kol Makom Sheshana Kamar. He means every place. Now, the reason why he was sort of asking the question is if you read the story was that Rabbi Shimon Shazuri says, I didn't know the halacha. I went to go ask Rabbi Tarfon, and Rabbi Tarfon told me the halacha. That doesn't quite sound the same as Rabbi Shimon Shazuri says the halacha is like this, right? But in fact, we say that it is. As long as Rabbi Shimon Shazuri is teaching it, it is the halacha. Okay. Back to Sefer Torah. Okay. Amar Reb Zeir. Reb Zeir says, Amar Rabbi Chananel, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav. Kara haba bishnei shitin. Let's say the parchment tears, right? And it tears through the top two lines of the column, right? But it has to go, obviously if it rips a letter, then you have a problem. It luckily rips through the spaces, but it goes 2 columns deep, right? Past the first letter, past the second, right? 2 lines down. Right. So yitfor, you can sew that up. Bishalosh, if it goes through 3, al yitfor. So at that point, right, then that one's torn too much. Don't sew that up, right? Go replace the whole section. Amar le Rabba Zute l'Ravashi. So Rabba Zute says to Ravashi, Hachi Amar Rebbe, Yirmiyah midifti mishmei de Rava. This is Rabbi Yirmiyah from Difti said to Rava. Had amrinan b'shalosh al yitfor. That which we said 3 columns you should not sew it up. Lo amran ella ba'atikasa. That's only if we've got an old Sefer Torah. Now, what's the deal with the old Sefer Torah? It starts to look worn out. And a new Sefer Torah, if you sew it up, you can make it look neat.
And not just that, when you're rolling it, it can easily rip.
That's what I was thinking when I saw that. I'm like, because it's probably weaker, worn out parchment already, so maybe it's more likely to re-tear some more. All of that could be why, right? He explains it in the notes here in the Mesivta that he says it doesn't look as nice. Right? If only you can only because it's old already. And so therefore this is a din in Zekeli Vanvehu, that you're trying to beautify your Sefer Torah. Aval Chadato, if you've got a new Sefer Torah, Leis Lan Ba, then it's not an issue. Okay? Velo atiksa mamish, velo chadaso mamish. Now, when we say an old Sefer Torah and a new Sefer Torah, we don't mean an old Sefer Torah or a new Sefer Torah. Right? That's not what we mean. So I guess maybe that answers Yehuda's question. He says maybe it's worn out. No, because it doesn't matter. It's not a matter of how worn out it is. Elaha dolo afitzon. Ha de afitzon. They used to have something called gol nuts. They grow on oak trees, I think, is where they are. And gol nuts. Yeah, you could look them up. And they produce some kind of oil, and that was used as a coating for parchment. If you put that on your parchment, so it makes it easier to write on. The problem is if you use it, so then it darkens the parchment a little bit, and it makes it old looking. That's what we say when it's old, right? When you don't put gall nuts on it, it's considered it's nice white parchment, and that looks like a brand new sheet. And the darker one, those are gall nuts, exactly, right? And it makes most times we don't use anything like that nowadays. I guess we've gotten good at writing it enough that and the consistency of the ink, and I guess the tools that we have to make it so that Sofrim didn't have to do it.
Known as oak apples, right?
They are oak apples, right? Yeah, exactly. So that's where they come from, oak trees, and they produce this kind of coating. So if it was a darker one, so I guess once the cloth would rip, then it would start to show. I guess the inner one part was light. It wouldn't look as nice. V'hani mili begiten. Now, as far as sewing it up, this is that you have to use gidin, sinews of animals that are kosher animals. Sinews is the tissue, the connective tissue that connects between muscles. Right, and so therefore, it's if you look at the string that they use to tie to sew your tefillin up, that's what it's made out of also, right? Because everything that a Torah is made out of has to be kosher, right? Aval begrodin, but if you use fringes of a garment, right? So then that's low. You can't use that. That's not what you're supposed to use. So, Rabbi Yehuda bar Abba. So Rabbi Yehuda bar Abba says, "Bein daf ledaf, bein shita l'shita mai." So he says, okay. So what happens if the tear is between the columns? Right? Does it matter? Because we said, can it be deeper? Because it's not going over to the words anyway. How about that? What about bein shita l'shita? What if the tear goes between the lines? This way, right? Horizontally rather than vertically. So what happens there? So we said teku. So that's a fair question, right? So it's best to be able to protect your Sefer Torah from those circumstances. But you'd have a suffix Sefer Torah. Don't use it for Parsha Zachar. This is coming up. Amar Rab Zeiri, Amar Rav Chananel, Amar Rav. So Rab Zeiri said, Amar Rav Chananel, Amar Rav. Mezuzah, let's move on to mezuzah. Mezuzah sheksava shtayim kshera. So if you've got mezuzah that you write on every line only two words, so then that's a kosher mezuzah.
Shema and Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael. The next Hashem Elokeinu. Right, each time. That's fine. Now iboilahu. So the question is shtayim v'shalosh v'achas. What if you do 2 words, then 3 words, then 1 word, right? What would be the halacha there? Now, in my Mesivta, they have nice little examples. I'm going to hold them up because makes sense, right? 2 words, 3 words, 1 word, right? Vehayu hadvarim, and then ha'ela sharanochi, and then mitzavacha, right? You're doing it in that kind of a pattern. What happens in that circumstance? So, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, kol shekain. For sure that's kosher. She'asa kishira, because what would be the problem? That absolutely looks like when you write az yashir. So here's our tikkun. And when we look at Az Yashir, from just a couple weeks ago, we see that it is written in this style, right? With some words, it gets narrower, it gets larger, right? So then what would be the problem with writing a mezuzah with a little bit and then wider and then skinnier?
I don't think there's any room on the parchment for it.
Well, it depends on how big your parchment is, right? Just whatever your parchment is. So, right, so he says, for sure this is okay, because he's made it, like the Shira. So Meisvei. So the people in the yeshiva asked against Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak. They said, the Brisa says, Asa Kashira, if you write a line in a Sefer Torah, like the Shira, O Shira Kamosa, or you write the Shira like a regular line, Psula, that makes the Sefer Torah puzzle. So if you get your Sefer Torah and you see it doesn't have it, that is actually makes the Sefer Torah, that's puzzle. So the Gemara understands that should also apply to mezuzah. So therefore, if I wrote my mezuzah in the style of a Shira, it should be puzzle. So the answer is no. Kitanya hiba Sefer Torah. That Brisa is talking specifically about a Sefer Torah, right? In a Sefer Torah, you can't write some lines looking like the Shira when they're not, and you can't write the Shira lines looking like regular lines. So, but mezuzah, it's not an issue. Mezuzah, you can make it patterned; it doesn't matter. Itmar Nami also was said Amar Rabbi Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Bar Chana said Rabbi Yochanan. The Amri Law, and some said it was Amar Rav Acha Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. That was Rav Acha Bar Chana said Rabbi Yochanan. Mezuzah she'also shtayim v'shalosh v'achas. If you make your mezuzah 2 words, then 3 words, then 1. So then kshera, it is kosher. Ubelvad shelo yasena kekuba. The only thing is that you can't make it like a tent, right? Which is wider on the bottom and narrower on top.
Or like,
So,
a pyramid.
a pyramid, yes. So he has like this, right? That's not what we want to see. We don't want to see that. But most times you see a mezuzah, they don't look like those things, right?
Yeah.
Ubilvad shelo yasena kazanov. Also, don't make it like a tail, which is where it's wide on top and gets narrower on the bottom, right? We don't want that either, right? So we want, if it goes 2, 3, 1, that's fine. But if it's 3, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 3, those are shapes that we don't want to be able to see. Okay. No explanations as far as I could tell why that necessary would be. But I guess that's not a considered a nice way for it to look.
Or just say no comment.
Could say. Amar Rav Chisda, he was like, answer me, not my answer, just no comment. Amar Rav Chisda says, Al haaretz b'shita achrona. The last words of a mezuzah are the words al haaretz, right? Because it's shma and v'haya im shemoa. So the last part of the paragraph, the last is kimei laseis lahem kimei shemaim aretz, right? Right. Vayomer is part of the next line of Shema. That's not part of mezuzah. Only the first 2 paragraphs are part of mezuzah. So if you have the word al haaretz on the last line, right? So you should write that on the last line. Okay. So right below. So I wonder if he has a picture of a mezuzah in this. Sometimes the tikkunim might. So if we do. So then great. Otherwise, I should have printed one out. I'll probably do that afterwards. They don't. Okay. Just double checking. Yeah, no, they don't have a mezuzah to be able to copy in here. Okay, but in any event, right? You should put the words al haaretz on the line at the end.
Alone.
That's what it says. Yes, right. You should write them by itself. Now, Ikad Amri Besofa Shita, some people say you should write it at the end of the line, and Ikad Amri Betchilas Hashita. Okay? Some people say right at the beginning of the line. And that's so it looks like this. La Seis. Lahem. It's going to take you a while. I'm just going to hold it up. I'm not used to writing in print, right? Okay. If you write it at the end, right, Laseis Lahem Hashemayim, and then Al Haaretz on the next line, or the beginning of the next line, Laseis Lahem Hashemayim Al Haaretz. Okay, those are your 2 options. Now, Man de Amar Besofa Shita, why would you write it at the end of the line? Because Kegavoa Shemayim Al Haaretz. Because if you look at the way it comes out, the word Shemayim is up, is above, and the word Aretz is below it. So it looks like the Shemayim is above the Aretz. Nice visual representation of the world, right? So that's nice. And Uman Damar B'tchila Shita, the other one says you put at the beginning of the line is Kihecha Demarach Shemayim Aretz, to show you the vast distance that exists between the Shemayim and the Aretz, right? As they are distanced from each other. Shemayim over there, Aretz is way over here, as far away from each other as they can go. Okay. Amar of Chelbo, and these seem to be nice ways to write mezuzahs, right? So Amar of Chelbo, Rav Chelbo says, Chazina leila Rav Huna, dekorech me'echad klape shma. I saw that Rav Huna, when he would roll his mezuzah up, he would roll from the end to the beginning. Start from echad, roll back, so that when you unroll, shma comes out first, right? So that's how you roll it up. You roll it from end to beginning. Osat parshioseha stumos. Also, when you finish the first parsha of Shema, right, you make a sosum, as we said, continue on the same line, v'haya im shemoa, right? You don't leave an open and then start on the next line, right? You just leave a space. Usually, the stuma is 9-letter space between the end of the first paragraph of Shema, and then v'haya im Shema continues on the same line. Okay, Meisvei. So we asked the following question. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Rabbi Meir haya kosva al duchsustus. A mezuzah, he used to write his mezuzah on something called duchsustus. Skin of an animal has two parts, has two sides, right? The outer facing side, which faces the hair, right? That side is called the klaf. The inside part is facing the flesh. That's called the duchsustus. And it's a thicker, yes, duchsustus, right? So that is the yes. This is the reason. It's a machlokas. It seems like, yeah, Rashi says it is the duchsustus is klaf shelo niklaf. It's just it's a parchment that wasn't cleaned out very well, right? That's how Rashi reads it, right? It's just a cloth that maybe has more hair on it or wasn't processed enough. So, but other opinions of duchsustus was a thicker, sturdier type of parchment made from the other part of the skin of the animal. Kosher. Yep. So he took a kimin daf and he made it, right, like a column of a Sefer Torah, which was long and narrow. The osa revach milmala, and he made a space above it. The revach milmat, and he made space on the bottom of it. The osa proshioseha psuchos, and we looked at his mezuzah, and his mezuzah had the paragraph open at the end of Shema, and v'hayim shemoa start on the next line, which is not like we just said. So amarti lo. So I said to him, Rebbe, matam. I asked him, why is it that you put the mezuzah that way? Why'd you make your mezuzah so that that it doesn't start on the same line? We're on Lamed Bey's Amud Aleph. Amar li. So he said to me, hol ve'ein smuchus min Torah. He says these parshios, there's no real they're not connected in the Torah together, right? One is in Vayes Chanan, and one is in. It's not Akev. Where's the next one? But it's later on, right? They're not connected to each other, so therefore it doesn't make sense to connect the two as though they continue on front one to the next. So it makes more sense. So Amar Li, so he said to me, Hol ve'ein smuchos min ha-Torah. So I'm sorry, that's what he answered. So Amar Rav Chanan Amar Rav Chanan and Rav halacha Reb Shimon ben Elazar. The halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Elazar. So therefore, my lav apsuchos, wasn't he saying that he's agreeing with him about how he wrote his mezuzah, leaving the empty space at the end of the line? Why are you saying that you're supposed to write your mezuzah so that the Hayim Shema starts on the same line? So he says, no, that's not what the point was. His point was, it's the halachas like him arevach. Remember, we said that he left space on the top of the mezuzah and space on the bottom of the mezuzah? That we liked. That, he says, the halachas like him as far as that's concerned. Okay, we had learned by the Sefer Torah, you got to leave a tefach on the bottom and 3 fingers on the top. V'kama revach, how much space do you leave on your mezuzah? So Amar Rav Menachos bar Yaakov, so Menachos, the son of Yaakov, says, V'amri la, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yaakov. Some said it was Rav Shmuel bar Yaakov, Kimlo atba disifrei. the amount of space it is for the clips that the sofrim use, right? If you've ever seen the sofrim, when they want to check a mezuzah, they roll it open, then they clip it to a board so they can hold it open, right? You don't want the clips to get onto the writing, so you got to leave enough space so that you can get these the sofrim can get their clips onto it, right? So it's utilitarian, right? No, utilitarian is like able to be utilized.
Is that I continue to draw myself.
Practical, yes, exactly. Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef. Abaye says to Rav Yosef. And again, it sounds as though, the way that reading these things, I'm not sure lehalacha, right? If you don't leave enough space, it sounds like this is kosher, which is not the best way, right? Because it's going to cause problems for the sofer when to check it, right? That's the way the Gemara sounds. Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, Va'at lo tisbara. Don't you hold that Dichi Amar Rav, that when Rav said this, Revach, that he was talking about the space? V'ha Rav Isle Minhaga Deha'idna Nohog Alma Bistumos. That Rav holds that the minhag of the entire world is that the mezuzos are written with the Parsha Vahaya coming on the same line, right? So the Amar Rabba Amar Rav Kahana, didn't Rabba say in the name of Rav Kahana Amar Rav? Im Yavo Eliyahu, if Eliyahu a Navi would come, the Yomar Cholzin B'minal, you can do chalitza with a shoe. Now we do chalitza with what's called a sandal. It's a special looking shoe that is used for chalitza, and then it seems that the question was, could you use a regular shoe for chalitza? So if Eliyahu Navi were to come, we know that practically speaking, it's a machlokas. So he says, if Eliyahu Navi were to come and say tomorrow, right, you can use a shoe, so then Shomin Lo, we'd listen to him, right? Because we didn't know, now he's telling us you can use the shoe. Great, we'll use the shoe. But Ein Choltzin Besandal, if Eliyahu Navi comes tomorrow and says you cannot use the sandal, Ein Shomin, we would not listen to Eliyahu HaNavi. Because why? Shekvar Nargu Ha'am Besandal, because that's already the minhag. And that shows you the strength of Minhag Klal Yisrael. If everybody's already doing it, that's the way that it should be continued to be done. And Eliyahu Navi does not have the power to come and say, but it's the other way. For Rav Yosef Amar Rav Kahana, Rav Yosef said the name of Kahana Rav, he said the name of Rav, Im Yavo Eliyahu, if Eliyahu Navi would come V'yomar Ein Choltzin B'minhal and say, you're not allowed to do it with a shoe. Again, that was the machlokas, right? If he thought you could, right? He says, you're not allowed to. Show me Hillel. Fine, we'd hear him, because we didn't know that's the halach or not. But Choltzin B'sandal, but if he says if he says Ein Choltzin B'sandal, you're not allowed to use the sandal, Ein Shomin, we would not listen to him. Shekvar Nagua Am B'sandal, because the nation's already using the sandal. V'amrinon my by Nahu. So he said, what's the difference of point of view between those two things? They basically say the same thing. Minol lechatchila, can you use a minol, right? One of the opinions says you can use it, so therefore he says, if Eliyahu Navi would come and say don't use it, okay, fine, I'd stop using it. The other one says, no, I don't use it, but if Eliyahu Navi would come and tell me to use it, I'd use it. But they agree, right, that you can't change the minhag of Yisrael, and so therefore, Elalav Shmamina Arevach Shmamina. So you can see clearly from here that if the minhag of Klal Yisrael is to write the mezuzahs with the word V'hayim Shema on the same line, he couldn't come along and say, Rav couldn't come along and say the halacha was like the other side that makes an extra space. That couldn't be the halacha. So therefore, when he said the halacha is like him, it means in the other question about the space on the top and the bottom that he agrees. But as far as halacha l'maisa goes, writing a mezuzah, you put 9 spaces and continue on the same line. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, mitzvah la'asos. Yehuda, see if you can pull up a PDF copy of mezuzah. Right? See if you can see a mezuzah, a picture of a mezuzah. That would be good for us to visually see it for a second. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, mitzvah la'asoson stumos. It's a mitzvah to make the parshios stumos, like we said. Ve'i avdinhu psuchos, but if you make them so that it is psucha, it's open, shapir dami, it is kosher. right? Umay psuchos de ka'amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. What is this opening that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is saying? So he says af psuchos. He means that you can even do psuchos, right? That's not right. That you don't have to make it stumos. You could, right? The halacha is that you're supposed to, but right. It's okay. So let's see what he has here.
So we can move to this.
That's right. So this is interesting. Because this one, he starts it on the second line. He puts Kahal Yereim Shmo in the second line, but he leaves an indent, right? Now that the halacha is that if you've got psuchos, right, then you leave open at the end of the line, so then you begin the next one on the beginning of the next line. But if you get to the end and you don't have 9-letter space, so then you have to leave an indent on the next line. That's the halacha. But I was not sure that that's lechatchila. It's interesting that the example mezuzah that they pick is that one. But notice al haaretz on the bottom, all by itself. So okay. That's interesting.
Is when a person gives over an authentic.
Right? And so that's what he's saying. That's what when we said the halacha is like that you're allowed to make psuchos. He's saying it's the halacha is that's a kosher mezuzah. Even if it's psuchos, it's fine. But lechatchila, you're supposed to make them stumos, but it can be psuchos. Okay, so now lema misayele. Okay, so let's say this supports what Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says that. Right, that you are allowed to make them that is a mitzvah to make them stumos with closed. So the Brisa says, he quotes this whole Brisa. I'm going to see if I read the Brisa here. The Brisa says tefillin shel yad osin shel rosh. You could take tefillin shel yad and turn them into a tefillin shel rosh. You got a parchment. That's a good question. So tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh have this.
Tefillin shel yad is the more important part of it.
Tefillin shel yad has 4 parshios written on one single parchment. Tefillin shel rosh have the same 4 parshios, but they're cut into 4 separate parshios, each one rolled up into a separate section. If I take the regular, let's say my shel yad, my shel rosh wears out, and I want to take the shel yad, I cut that parchment up.
But shel rosh has the shin, shel yad has the box.
Well, I'm going to need a new box, right? I can't use the same box. I just talked about the parchments, right? I can cut the parchment up and roll it up and make that parchment into shel rosh tefillin, right? Right. He even says that it's potentially even mutter that you could take the bayit of the shel yad and use it as a shel rosh, right? But you can't turn a shel rosh to shel yad because it's mailin bekedusha ve'ein moridin. You can go upward in kedusha, you can't go downward in kedusha, and the tefillin shel rosh, as Yehuda said, has more kedusha than the shel yad. Right?
The box has a shin on the box.
Yes. So and not only that, it has the shin plus it has the dalet in the back. Whereas the shel yad only has the yud on it. So the Shem Hashem is shun daled yud, right? Shakai.
So when you put tefillin, you do shin, then you do daled and then the yud.
Right, but on the box itself, the yud is tied in a knot on the shel yad, and the shin and the daled is on the shel rosh. So therefore, that's why it's a higher level kedusha. So you could turn your shel yad into a shel rosh. Okay, but you can't go the other way. Right.
Other people.
Not on Purim. Even the halacha still applies on Purim. I don't know. It's still okay. Fine. Then the Brisa continues, and that's where we're going to read inside. Kayotzebo. Similarly, Sefer Torah shebola utfilin shebolu. Let's say I've got a Sefer Torah that wears out. So I say, well, there are certain parts of the Sefer Torah that can be very helpful, right? And let's say I've got tefillin that wear out. Ein osin mehem mezuzah. I'm not allowed to take the portions of mezuzah, cut them out, and use that as a mezuzah. Right? Why not? I've got this big section. I don't need to use the whole Torah. But if I got one little, just cut out, can't. Why? Because you can't take it from a Sefer Torah, which was a higher level kedusha, and lower it down to mezuzah, the lower level kedusha. Right? Also, you can't go for tefillin. Remember, tefillin has 4 parshios in it. Right. The 2 ones, Shema and V'hayim Shmo, could be used in a mezuzah. Yeah. I can't take that section, the tefillin, the mezuzah section, and use that in my mezuzah, because I'm going from tefillin to mezuzah. Tefillin is on the body, mezuzah is on the door, so therefore the higher level kedusha of tefillin can't go down to a mezuzah. So now, Ha-moridin. Now, what does this tell me? If I could go down, if that wasn't the issue, so then osin, then otherwise it wouldn't be a problem. So now, amai, how could you do that? Hacha stumos v'hacha psuchos. In a Sefer Torah, the parsha of Shema Yisrael and V'hayim Shmoa are stumos. They are connected to the previous section. And here, by mezuzah, you're saying that they should be psuchos, they should be open. So therefore, obviously it seems that it should require it to be so here the psuchos shows you clearly that psuchos would be acceptable, right? So I'm sorry, that stumos would be acceptable. So if you're saying mezuzah needs to be psuchos, this would be a problem. That proves that stumos are acceptable. Okay, so the answer is no. Dilma lahashlim. No, maybe what we mean is I wouldn't. How would I do this? I'd cut out my section of Shema, and let's say it was on the bottom of a column, and I'd have the Shema, and then I'd have a blank piece of parchment on the bottom. Then I would take it and I would write V'hayim Shmo underneath. And that I theoretically could write whatever way I want. It doesn't prove anything. Or the other way around, by V'hayim Shmo, if I took V'hayim Shmo and I had a little section on top and I could write the other. Now that would not work. Why wouldn't that work? We're going to learn later on that mezuzahs have to be written kisidron. They have to be written in order. So you can't write the parsha of the V'hayim Shemoah first and then the parsha of Shema second. So you can't write the section before it.
The parchment we use, is it leather for the mezuzah as well, or what kind of material?
The parchment is parchment, right? Which is made out of leather, right? It's skin. It's not leather, but it's parchment, which is the just like a thin layer of the leather. Now the question here was the presumption that you were taking the parts of the Sefer Torah and you were cutting them, and how are you connecting them? Are you connecting them by sewing them together? We're going to see later on in the Gemara, Rashi and Tosfos have an argument about whether you could sew two pieces together in order to make one thing, or whether that doesn't work. But okay, but in any event, this is the point that we're making here is that it doesn't prove our issue of stumos versus psuchos, because what I'm doing is I'm cutting out the section and then I'm going to write the V'hayim Shema section underneath, and so therefore it could be done. Even though in the Sefer Torah it's a stuma, I could write it as a psucha.
I don't think you're allowed to cut. You have to write it, keep it on the same parchment, aren't you, for mezuzah?
Well, you're cutting it out of a Sefer Torah, right? That's what you're doing. So now, ha-moridin osin. Now, again, we're going to see another problem. We're suggesting that you can't go from a Sefer Torah down to mezuzah. But other than that problem, the writing would be fine. How come? But about V'atanya, we learn in our Brisa, halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Well, halacha l'Moshe Misinai is tefillin al klaf, that you have to write tefillin on cloth, parchment, right? That's the outer section, the smooth outer section. And mezuzah al duchsustus. And mezuzah is supposed to be written on duchsustus, right? We said that was the inner part of the skin of the animal. That's what Rashi says, right? In the sheet, right? So that's what Rashi says, the inner part. Klaf b'makom basar, and when you write on the klaf, you use not the side that's facing the hair, you use the inner part of that skin towards and duchsustus b'makom se'ar, and the duchsustus, which is the inner part, you don't use the part that faces the flesh, you use the other part also. Either way, you use the middle section, basically, right? But it seems that the material that you're writing it on is different between tefillin and mezuzah. So therefore, how could you go from tefillin to mezuzah? So the answer is lemitzvah. The answer is that's not required. That's only in a perfect world, right? So therefore, you could take from the tefillin and go to the mezuzah, except for the fact that you can't go downwards. Ve'atanya, but didn't we learn in a brisa? Shina, that if you make this change and you go from klaf to duchsustus or duchsustus to klaf, it's pasul. It's not good. So, but tefillin, it's pasul by tefillin. So the answer is that's just tefillin. Meaning tefillin, you can't write tefillin on duchsustus. But mezuzah you could write on duchsustus. You could write on klaf. Ve'atanya, we learn a brisa. Shina bein bazeh puzzle. We have this brisa that says, no, if you change even the mezuzah, anything, change the tefillin, change the mezuzah, you write it on duchsustus instead of klaf, or klaf instead of duchsustus, it's puzzle. So the answer is idi ve'idi betfillin. No, we're saying both of these are talking about on tefillin. V'ha dichsafinu aklaf b'makom seyar, v'ha dikasvinu aduchsustus b'makom basar. This that we're saying, either way it's puzzle is what's the two ways. Way number one, if you took klaf, which is what you're supposed to write it, and I wrote it on the back part of the klaf instead of the inner part of the klaf, or I took duchsustus and I used that. That would be the other reason it's puzzle. So either way is puzzle. Okay, v'ibais ema, or else if you will want, I can say, we're on lamed beis and beis. If you want, I will say, shina bazeh bazeh tanaihi, that when it says, if you make any change, that's a machlokas. You're right. There is an opinion that holds that mezuzahs are required to be done on duchsustus, and if you change to klaf, it's not valid. Detanya is going to brisa. Shina bazeh bazeh, if you change, whether in tefillin or mezuzah, it's puzzle. Rabbi Acha machshir mishum Rabbi Achai Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Acha makes the mezuzah kosher in the name of Rabbi Achai Rabbi Chanina. V'amrila, and some say that it was Mishmei de Rabbi Yaakov Rabbi Chanina. Right, that's their source that says that the brisa says that you cannot make a mezuzah from tefillin materials or tefillin from mezuzah materials, but the other brisa that we have says you can. Okay, fine. Sorry? It is exactly a machlokas. That's correct. It's machlokas. Okay. So now, Gemara wants to know, is the reason why, again, can't go from tefillin to mezuzah, is because of you can't go down in kedusha. Ha moridin osin. If it weren't for that fact, if you could go down, it would be fine. Because again, we're trying to note all the differences in the ways that tefillin are written than mezuzahs, and point out that there are many reasons why you can't go from tefillin to mezuzah. So the ha boi sirtut. Here's another thing that you need. You need to have what we call sirtut. That we said is where you take the klaf and you score it in order to make lines, marking lines. So when it comes to mezuzah, you need to have sirtut. When it comes to tefillin, you don't. So now, how are you supposed to go from tefillin to mezuzah when the tefillin was written? It didn't have sirtut, which means it's invalid as a mezuzah. Damar Marnumi Bar Chilkia Amar Rabbi Chama Bar Gurya Amar Rav, as Rabbi Yumi Bar Chilkia says Rabbi Chama Bar Gurya in the name of Rav. Kol mezuzah she'ena misur tetes psula. If the mezuzah doesn't have sirtut on it, is puzzle. V'Rav Minyamin Bar Chilkia Didei Amar Sirtut Shal Mezuzah Halach al Moshe Sinai. Where do we know that from? Halach al Moshe Sinai. That's it. That's because Moshe was told that. That's it. So therefore, how can you go from tefillin to mezuzah? It wouldn't be kosher. And we learn from here that you can't put the sirtut in afterwards. Right? You can't take tefillin and go, no problem, I'll just fix it. Put the sirtut in. No, it's got to be written. The sirtut has to be before. Okay, otherwise it doesn't help. So the answer is Tanaihi. It's machlokas again. Detanya where a brayser. Yirmiyah Omer Rabbi says Mishum Rabbeinu tefillin umezuzos nichtavos shalom min aksav. When you write tefillin and mezuzos, when we said the sofer is copying from one sefer to the other sefer, he's writing a sefer Torah. When you're writing mezuzah and tefillin, he doesn't have to, right? Ve'ein tzrichos sirtut, and they don't need sirtut, right? Why? Because we presume the sofer is so. We'll see in a second. The halachas is tefillin lo by sirtut. Tefillin does not require sirtut. Mezuzah by sirtut, and mezuzah does. Ve'idi nichtavos shalom min eksav, and both mezuzah and tefillin can be written without looking inside. You can rely on his memory. My time, what's the reason? Migras grisin, because these are common paragraphs that people know, right? You say these paragraphs all the time, so therefore they know them, and therefore there's no problem with making mistakes. And you could trust the sofer's memory. Amar Rav Chelbo says, Ana chazite l'Rav Huna, I saw Rav Huna dehava Yosef Apuria de Sefer Torah alei. He was sitting on a bed, and the Sefer Torah was on the bed with him. Now they have beds.
The big no.
That's basically his chair, right? He had a chair, and he's sitting on the couch, right? The couch has the Sefer Torah sitting on there, and he sits down on there. V'kaf lekoda ara, and he took the pillow and he threw it onto the ground. The anach alei Sefer Torah, v'hadar Yosef. And he moved the Sefer Torah over to that other location, and then he sat down, right? He didn't want to sit down where the Sefer Torah was.
He was already sitting there with the Sefer Torah.
He wasn't. Right? He saw that it was there, right? He saw, right? He saw he saw his, I thought maybe he was, but maybe when he realized, he got up, or he saw that the Sefer Torah was there, so he moved it over to another cushion, and then he sat down.
Yeah, they translate, they say, I saw Rav Huna who wished to sit on a bed. Not that he did, he wanted to, and then he saw the Sefer Torah.
Sorry. And he didn't want to put it on the ground, obviously.
Right.
So these are some halachas that we know. From here we know, can't put a Sefer Torah on the ground. You can't sit on the same place.
You fast for 40 days.
Fasting for 40 days. The Gemara never talks about this and fasting for 40 days as far as these kinds of things, but this is where this issue would come up. And the Mefarshim discuss, why are we fasting when we drop a Sefer Torah? What is the reason why? And there's two ways to look at it. One is that we're fasting because we didn't treat the Sefer Torah right, and it's a terrible tragedy and fast 40 days. The other way is Hashem is sending us a message that the Sefer Torah fell, so clearly we need to do tshuva, and we fast for 40 days to do tshuva for whatever problems we have.
We can't survive for the fast for 40 days.
So
It's divided up.
yes, you eat at night.
Huh?
You eat it at night.
It's like you're going, okay.
It's like Ramadan.
It's like you're going on a diet.
Yeah.
Diet.
Right.
Doesn't everyone take I'll take Monday.
That's a
you
good
take
question
Tuesday,
whether you do it that way. I don't know. I've never, Baruch Hashem, never been this. I was in a situation where somebody did Hagbah and a tour, and the Rav got up and said, we all should do tshuva, right? It's very important because clearly this is as we said, like, sorry?
If the person tears, you do fast or what do you do?
I don't think you fast, but again, you have to look. These are bad omens or situations, things that people should be worried about, and that means when something like that happens, you should be looking and saying, what message is Hashem trying to send me? Right? That's what we should be doing. Right? Everybody should be looking around, going, right? That Hashem sent me this, put me in this situation to learn a lesson from this. Right? Now, then he sat down b'mita. Kasavar, he thought Rav Huna was thinking, gabi mita shesefer Torah munach. You can't sit down on a bench or a chair where the Sefer Torah is, and that applies to Sfarim or any of these other kinds of things, right? But putting a Sefer on a chair in the first place might not be respectful to do, right? So you put it where a person sits. So I see people that will put a Sefer and turn it on its side so that it's not
stand it up,
right? So they don't lie it down on the thing, right? But people would avoid putting a Sefer where people sit, right? Upliga de Rabbi Bar Chana this argues with what Rabbi Bar Chana says. Sefer Torah munachal. You can sit on a bench or a couch where a Sefer Torah is on it. Ve'im lechashcha Adam Lomar. And if somebody starts to whisper in your ear and tell you the story of Mais Rabbi Elazar, the story of Rabbi Elazar, who was sitting on a couch, and somebody said, "Hey, there's a Sefer Torah there." He got up and he sat on the ground to avoid being able to sit with it. He jumped off like a snake was biting him, right? He went, whoa, there's a snake, and he jumped off. Hasam Sefer Torah agabi karka hava. That was different because the Sefer Torah was on the ground. So therefore, he says that was where it was, that's what was bothering him, right? He was sitting, right? I guess he wasn't really sitting on the bench or he was sitting on the bench and the Sefer Torah was on the ground. He jumped up. The issue wasn't the fact that he was sitting on a bench with the Sefer Torah. The issue was the Sefer Torah was on the ground. So that's why he jumped up to take care of it. Right? So he says here, but he says, "Kasav bechidushim hamiyuchasim l'Rashba." The Rashba says, "Sheheina kavana shasefer Torah hayamunach al karka mamish." It's not that the Sefer Torah is literally on the ground. Sharei kasav shasefer Torah hayamunach aleha alamita, because we said that it was on the bed. First, that was the whole point of the story, was it was on the bed. Elashayamunach betachtis hamita samach lekarka. It was on the bottom of the bed, close to the ground. Rabbi Elazar yashav el yona hamita, and Rabbi Elazar was sitting on the top of the bed. V'lachein yitzar shezeh bizayin l'Sefer Torah sheyoshev yoser. He thought it was disrespectful that the Sefer Torah was higher than the Sefer Torah. This raises questions. You see in some of the older shuls that they have these little baskets that are underneath the seats that you could put a slide of chumash underneath the seats, right? problematic, right? Potentially problematic. You want to be able to make sure there's sufficient space in between those baskets and the svarim that you're sitting on top of before you put it in there, right? How much space? I would presume a tefach, like we had learned yesterday with the space or whatever, and otherwise it's potentially, potentially be something to be avoided. If you really want to upset, ask the rabbi of that shul. If you see an upset individual, he's like, please. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda say Shmuel, Ksava Igeres, if you write a mezuzah like a letter, which means that you don't put sirtut on it. As we said, you have to have sirtut. You just write it like a letter, and or you're not precise, and you leave the extra letter yuds or vavs out. Psula, so that's puzzle, right? My time. What's the reason? Asya ksiva ksiva mi sefer, because we have exer shava from mezuzah to writing a sefer Torah. Actually, sefer, which is by the. He actually says sefer krisos. Custom with sefer krisos could be from that he's learning it from get. That potentially that get is the source from sirtut. Okay. So in any event, mezuzah requires sirtut, and if it's missing, it's no good. And you start leaving out letters, also no good. You can't write it casually. V'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says to Shmuel, Tla'a b'makal. If you hang your mezuzah on a stick, okay. So, for example, right, he's got a picture here, so I'll draw this. Here's my door, right, and I dangle my mezuzah here. Okay. So psula. So that's puzzle. Yehuda, you already read ahead. You already know your halachas mezuzah. That's psula. My time. What's the reason? Bisharecha ba'inon. It needs to be in your gate, right? In the opening itself. Hanging it off a stick in the doorway is not on the doorway. So that's not good. Tanya Namiach, we also learned this. Tal'a b'makal, if you hang it on a stick in the door. O sheinicha achar hadelas, or let's say you put it on the inside of the door frame, right? You've got a door, right? And instead of putting it here, you put it here.
Still not good.
Okay, that's also no good. Now we're going to learn that it can be. Let's say you've got a French door, right? And the door is impossible. You can't put it in the doorway because that's where the door closes to. If it's impossible to put it any other way, so we're going to see that the halacha is you put it in the tefach samach l'pesach. You put it in the tefach, which is the tefach closest to the door. But if you can get it in the doorway and you put it here, that's no good. So therefore, if you put it achar hadelas, sakana, it's dangerous. Ve'ein ba mitzvah, and you don't have any mitzvah. What's dangerous about it? So what's dangerous about it is the mitzvah is supposed to be a shmira, Rashi says, right? You're supposed to get guard and protection, and if you have your mezuzah in the wrong place, you don't have any protection. So that's dangerous. And then there are other mefarshim who have a much simpler explanation. You hang it here, you're going to bump your head and hurt yourself. So that's dangerous. And also ein ba mitzvah. You're not fulfilling the mitzvah of doing it in that circumstance. Shall base munbaz hamelach in the Munbaz Hamelech's in his I guess his people. Hayu osin bepund kisehon kain. They used to do this in their temporary dwellings. Right? There's no mitzvah to put a mezuzah up if you're going to live someplace temporary. You go to a hotel room. You don't have to put a mezuzah up in your hotel room. Right? It's not your permanent place. But what would they do? They attached it with a stick. Why? Zecher l'mezuzah. It's a good remembrance, right? We see these people, they hang their, I was thinking like people put their car mezuzahs or they hang their little chains or whatever, those kinds of things, right? So, okay, maybe that's what they hang their little, hung their mezuzah. Because I guess they spent so much time on the road, maybe they're like, we miss our mezuzah. So therefore they hung some kind of reminder up in order to remember the mezuzah.
They have the menorah on the cars.
Yeah, that's right. Right? So that is, okay, that's where we stop.
Beautiful.
We will pick up Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel.
Hey, Yehuda.
I'm telling you.